I was excited to see, I think that's probably pushing a bit too far. I was quite pleased to see that when the Global Alliance met in Stockholm to talk about the Stockholm Accords, right at the top when they're explaining what public relations is, public relations and communication management professionals, what do? There are 4 things, but the one that I'm picking out is they apply social networking, research skills and tools to interpret stakeholders and society's expectations and use that as a basis for decisions. It has to then lead to dialogue, it has to lead to engagement, but it's recognizing that this engagement with the flow and web networked communications is so important to us. I was also pleased last week that one of the most important thinkers in public relations, Professor James Grunnig, whose work that Dayan has made a significant contribution to, was talking to the PRSA, American Public Relations Society, just 2 weeks ago in Washington. And Professor Grunnig, who's put forward with the excellent models, working with his teams of researchers and collaborators, a very robust paradigm for our understanding of public relations. One that people like me, young upstarts who are trying to challenge what's out there, think, oh, the paradigm needs to be rocked. Has very convincingly, I think, showing how the arguments that he has built forward actually encompass these ideas. And Jim Grunnig said last week, your reputation is what people say and think about you, and there is no better place to find it than on the internet. I think it's beyond that now. I think that really, Professor Grunnig should say the place to find it, the place where your reputation happens is the internet. That's why I'm suggesting that now all public relations is online. Okay, we don't reach everybody, but our reputations are completely formed by public relations, by online PR. And think how, if you don't believe me, think 10 years, Pascal was talking about what happened 10 years ago, and some of that sounded like another world, didn't it? 10 years ago, when we didn't have YouTube, when we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have the idea of a mobile phone that you could watch films on, engage with the world, seemed a long, long, long way away. We had the internet, but it didn't really work. So in the last 5 years, most of the things I've talked about have happened in 5 years. In 10 years' time, the idea that anybody will not have some version of this, anybody in the developed world, and will not be able to use those tools, I think is difficult to understand. So, okay, I may still be pushing it a little bit by saying if only half of the people in Croatia have done this, all PR's online. The statistics don't quite back my argument now, but the thinking about reputation management and relationship management does. But just to finish off, you might think about let's just think a little bit again, let's go back to our policeman, my policeman, not the real Interior Ministry spokesman who gave such a good explanation of how things are done in Croatia. Within the space of their 24 hours of tweeting, they sent these 3,500 tweets, and we can see at 5 o'clock in the morning, the first hour of the day, 20 or 30 tweets, and through the day it climbs and it climbs and it climbs. At the same time, the first few tweets are being followed by people who follow Greater Manchester Police. It turned out it was about 3,000. Quite why 3,000 people would follow Greater Manchester Police, I'm not terribly sure. The story was picked, I didn't mean that horribly, I mean just why would you do it? What do you learn from that? So I'm a little bit surprised there are 3,000 people there. But people are using hashtags which make tweets searchable. And people are retweeting what they said. So people like me, I heard it on the radio. To be honest, I heard this story on the radio saying GMP is doing this. And I searched for it on Twitter. And I see the 3,000 tweets because I actually followed it because it was more exciting than Dixon of Dot Green. This was real policing. And other people are retweeting it. They're passing it on. The endorsement of a third party. And interestingly, the really interesting bit, they're using this hashtag, #GMP24. And they're using different Twitter accounts. It takes half an hour or so. Somebody thinks, hey, I'll be GMP, I'll start tweeting. And they're making up ridiculous, they're making up spoof tweets. So-and-so's been arrested, such and such has happened. Endless. I come from Manchester, and I have the good fortune to support the right side of Manchester, Manchester United. There were endless tweets about Manchester City. 0510, call to Eastlands, that's Manchester City's ground. Call to Eastland, trophy cabinet empty, has been for 21 years. Endless tweets like this through the course of the day. There were ones like, saw black person walking down the road, beat him up, that sort of tweet. The sort of things that the chief constable, and when they thought of it, knew were going to happen and must have been terrified. If we set this going, people will make fun of us. And somebody took the brave decision and saying, well, actually, people always make fun of the police. It's part of our job. If we're doing our job properly, a lot of people will support us. And what happened was, there were lots of funny tweets making fun of the police, but there were lots and lots and lots of people saying, gosh, don't they do a great job? Did you realize they did this? It sort of almost backfired on them in a way that I hadn't really expected. They were trying to show that they did a whole range of different things. What it actually showed, we saw here, this is call 276 at 6:52. Quite early in the process, damage to car, police attending an alarm at a business, suspicious man seen in garden, report of theft, report of car causing obstruction, member of the public in Salford complains about being woken up. Well, yeah, but at the same time, somebody might have been raped or murdered, but our police officers go racing, have to deal with that call. Member of the call from neighbouring force requesting attendance at address. Report of man walking in the road in Wigan. I live in quite a highly surveillance society. We have more CCTV in the UK than anywhere else in Europe. We haven't yet got to the stage where walking in the road is an offence. The man walking in the road in Wigan, I presume, probably had some sort of mental health problems. Being serious, what the tweets showed was a huge amount of the work that the police done was social work. They were helping people who were lost and confused, having problems dealing with their lives. It showed the complexity of what the police did, but in some ways it also showed that perhaps some of their resources were being channeled towards things that the police might not do. The same person who might be facing a terrorist threat. But what our police are just about to we're about to have an elite police force with heavy armament to counter things like the Mumbai shootings. But we're also going along and saying, excuse me, you seem to be walking down the road, sir. Are you a little confused? Can I take you home? So it showed an openness and transparency that gave us a great understanding of police that maybe we didn't have before. It also, just to wind up, I think, gave us this wonderful, here was my favourite, 8:45 in the morning, report of man holding baby over bridge. Oh, that's serious. Police go running out, and we want them to be there very, very quickly. We want to have enough police officers, that they can get there, because this baby's life's in danger. The baby might be about to be thrown off the bridge. Police make their way quickly to there. Hello, hello, hello. What have we got? Dobry den, dobry den, dobry den. Police immediately attend. It was a man carrying a dog that doesn't like bridges. But that's the reality of everyday policing. We learnt about it through the engagement of social media. The story spilled into traditional media. It was on radio and television. And it was played both ways. Some newspapers said, what a fantastic experiment. How much have we learnt from the police? And others said, what a complete waste of time. What I'm saying then, to wind up is to say that we've seen not only a fundamental change in the vectors of communication, but we've also seen an immense fragmentation in channels. We can't just decide how we're going to reach certain publics. We're not in the way that we used to do. Our audience have fragmented, and we have to respond to those conversations in totally different ways. We have to develop new ways of telling stories because the linear development of controlled news has disappeared. The narrative flows are there, but they are anything but linear. And we've probably learned that perhaps you can't have too many friends. You can't have too much money, you can't be too thin, you can't have too many friends. But we've also learned from what I've said here, I hope, that the more friends you have, the harder that you have to try, the harder that you have to work. That is the inevitable conclusion of the thesis that all PR is now online PR. Thank you. Have we time for questions? Do you want some questions? Questions? Does anybody want to ask questions, break a tradition and... Gosh, I must have done something terribly wrong if somebody's going to ask a question. Can you ask it in English? This is real reputation. It's when people go out of the room and start talking amongst themselves. I've told you what I think. Now you go out and talk about it. That's reputation. Out of my control. I've done my bit. That's why PR is online.
Evo pitanja. Ću na hrvatskom ili ćete prevoditi?
I haven't got a translation.
Okay.
Hang on. Hang on. It's okay, I'll try. Can you ask it in English?
Okay, yes. You were talking about reputation image. And I'm asking about a conversation you're talking that we cannot influence on it on social networks. For example, Facebook. In terms of company, we are facing more and more that companies today are more present at Facebook with their company profiles. And the question is, what's the risk level that companies taking with Facebook activation regarding the feedback? They cannot control it. What's the risk level for a company image?
I think that we can answer that in two ways. One, what is the risk level of a company presence on Facebook? We ask that in two ways. One is they can do the wrong thing on Facebook. They can preach. They can tell people how wonderful they are. They can put out inappropriate messages, and they can look like, you know, your 60-year-old uncle dancing at a disco or something. They can look inappropriate. They can say the wrong things, like swearing in church or whatever it might be. So they can be inappropriate. That's one of the risks. The other risk is, I think the thing that I would say all the way through is that if they create a forum on social networks where people will say something, they have at least some control over that forum. If they don't do it, people will still say those things. And to not engage in those conversations is, do you remember when you were little and you're hiding, or you've got little children hiding, and they go, you can't see me, and I've got my head down here. They don't realize my great big bottom's sticking up there. I can't see you, so you can't see me. And that's what a lot of organizations are doing. If they're not, they are part of the dialogue that's online, so they may as well have a presence in the conversation. If I go out into the bar later on, and we're talking about what I've said, there may be a group of people saying, that was utter rubbish, I hated all that, what was he talking about? Or there might be a group that I'm part of, and probably some of you will be a little bit nicer to me face to face. And they'll probably, if I join in the conversation and explain a little bit about what I'm saying, and you realize that deep down I'm quite a nice guy, you'll be nicer to me. So Yeah, the level is, if you do it appropriately, being part of the conversation is inevitably better than not being part of the conversation. And it is not a huge risk because the risk is there anyway. Okay? I think that's... Thank you.